Okay, so what we're going to talk about right now is something called corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, the CPTC. See, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, CPCTC. Okay, so this is something where the idea is that if you know that two triangles are going to be congruent, and here's a congruent statement, then you know the corresponding parts have to be congruent. It's basically just from the definition of what congruent means. So the exact same shape and the exact same size. So if we have a congruent statement like this, triangle RST is congruent to triangle LMN, what that means is the corresponding parts which you can get from the congruent statement, like RS, that line segment, and LM, that line segment, they have to be congruent. Okay, angle R, which is this one right here, would have to be congruent to angle L. So all of the corresponding parts have to be congruent. Now notice you don't get that by where the triangles are, how the triangles are aligned. You get them from the congruent statement. Angle S would be matched up to the middle letter, which is M, down here. Angle T, would be the last one, and that would match up with angle N. Now ST, the second line segment, which is this one right here, would match up with MN. And then there's only one segment left, one side left, that's RT and LM. That's RT is the first and last, LM is the first and last. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this to prove different sides are congruent. But in order to use it, the first thing that you need is you need congruent triangles. So what that does is when we're creating a proof, it'll add one extra step. So let's go ahead and look at this one right here. So we have two different triangles. We're given some information. AC is congruent to CE. AC, this one right here. CE, this one. So these two are congruent. DC is congruent to BC. And then notice AB congruent to DE. That's what we're supposed to prove. Now notice AB and DE are not marked as congruent. We do not know that they're congruent yet. We have to show that they are. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to show that these two triangles, triangle ABC and triangle EDC, are congruent. That's the first step. So we'll start off exactly like before. We're going to have to find show that those two are congruent using one of these congruent statements. So look at the problem, spend a few seconds marking everything off. Notice what we have. We have a pair of sides and another pair of sides. So there's one pair, there's another pair. So what we have so far is two sides. We need a third pair. So that means it's either going to be this one or this one. We're not going to use ASA because that would require finding two more sides, and we'd only have to use two more angles, and we would have to only use one of these. Having an extra side by itself isn't a problem, but it would be much easier to find one angle than two. And whenever you see that X, you see crossing lines or line segments like this, you should always remember what we have right there is vertical angles. So that vertical angles gives you a way of finding these two congruent. So remember, that's the key. Vertical angles are congruent. We want the vertical angles that are inside the triangle, so we're going to use these two. So vertical angles are congruent. That gives you an extra angle. Okay, so we have a side, another pair of sides, another angle. But there's no side angle. Let's check to make sure we have the right order. Side, angle, side. Okay, so that's the order it's going to be in. Side, angle, side. We're going to use that. Now, once we know that these two triangles are congruent, then by definition, all of the other parts also have to be congruent. So angle A and angle E, angle D and angle B, and the one that we need is AB and DE. So then that will be able to show these two are congruent because of this. So this, in this case, this will not be the last statement we use. The last reason. It will be second to last. So we're going to start off just like before. We're going to start off with our given. AC congruent to CE given. And that's a pair of sides. DC congruent to BC, and that's given. And it's also a pair of sides. Third step is this angle pair in the middle. So one of them is angle DCE. That's one angle right here, and that's going to be congruent to angle BCA. Okay, now we had to figure that one out. Remember, the given information is anything that was given to us up here. It'll be next to the given statement. Okay, we're being told that this is part of the problem and that this is true. We were not told that this is true. We had to figure that out from our knowledge of vertical angles. So this one is not given, but what it is vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so that's the vertical angles theorem. So now that gives us enough for side, angle, side. Because it's not this order, it's this order from the picture. You get it. Side, angle, side. Now once we know that, we know that the two triangles have to be congruent. So what we want is, we can go angle ABC. Just make sure you go in the right order when you make the congruence statement. So we can't go ABC and then DCE. Okay, we want to start in the same spot. So I'm going to start with angle A, B, and C like this. Okay, now look where this is. We have the double markings here. There's the C. A is on the end of that double marking. So that's the way I'm identifying it. We go over here and we have C. E is on the end of this double marking. So on the other end is C. So from C to E, from C to A, same length. So we need to start out with E. So that's going to be triangle E. Now we're going to go CA, I'm sorry, A, we're going to go from A to B. That's going across this way. And this one will be going the other way. So this is the one unmarked side, right? That's what we're trying to find. So AB, ED. And then back to C, back to C. So both of them go back to C like that. So we get the congruent statement for the congruent statement for the triangles. And the reason we know that's true is side, angle, side. So now we're not done yet, because remember, that's not our proof statements. That's not what we're trying to prove. But that tells us what we need to know in order to make the proof statement. So now we take the proof statement, AB, congruent to DE, write that down here. So remember, you always end with whatever it is you're trying to prove. That's the last thing. Once you've proven that, you don't have to go any further. So AB congruent to DE. Now, how do we know that's true? Well, because these two triangles, we've already shown that they're congruent. That means all of the corresponding parts have to be congruent. That's our CPCTC. So you abbreviate it as CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. For me, it helps me to write it, to say it as I write it out. Otherwise, with all these C's and all these C's, I get confused. So, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Of course, all you really have to do is write this down and with the definition next to it, and then that way every time you use it, you can just take a look at it and you'll know corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Now this is the last step. We're done.